Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Robot Thought Leaders podcast. Today, we've got a very special guest joining us, Teradyne's president of the Industrial Automation Group, which oversees Universal Robots, MiR, and AutoGuide, Greg Smith. Previously, Greg Smith served as the president of semiconductor test for Teradyne from February of 2016 till October of 2020, when he took over as the president of the Industrial Automation Group. So I hope you all enjoy the podcast today. It's a great one.
That was awesome. That was, I would say, probably one of the best, if not the best.
It's hard to pick from all the different podcasts we've done. They've all been great, but there's just so much content there. I think we talked so much about marketing and what's going to change.
On marketing, you recommended, right?
Fields, right?
On marketing and marketing 4.0 were both two book recommendations.
And I just think about how it's a lot of the things that we're trying to do too, right? From delivering new authentic content for people to consume and really grab a hold of. But this was so broad-based that, it's applicable to so many other things outside of robotics too. I think a lot of industries, a lot of different solutions out there and products out there can take what we talked about on the podcast today and really learn from it and apply it back into their own businesses, whether that's a specific product, distribution channel, integration. There's so much applicable there.
I appreciate Greg a lot because he can simultaneously, switch between being very, business and strategy minded with his insights, and then also jump right down into, here are some of the specific things that I see as barriers right now.
Yeah.
So he was talking strategically about growing, and where we have to go for the next 10 years as an industry. Yep. But he was then again jumping right into, here's probably the top 5 problems I see right now with how we go to market.
Yeah, and really looking at what's today, how to bridge that gap for the future. We also discussed what his favorite robot company was. No leading hints there about who he nominated. We discussed a potential future way to have Teradyne invest even more in small companies that want to pursue being focused on UR as well. Yeah, just a great overall interview. So please listen and enjoy.
Welcome to the Robot Thought Leaders podcast with Zach Tompkinson and Chris Savoya, bringing you in-depth interviews with industry experts driving change in the robot world.
All right, now we are recording, and first of all, thank you for coming on. So welcome. And but we were just starting to get into some great conversations, and we weren't recording. So I would really want Greg to restate what we were this kind of question and topic, and have him start with this.
We touched on collaborative automation, solutions versus component manufacturing, integrator and distributor models. We were talking about training, how much training it really influences not just like actually programming the robot, but you got to learn logic, you got to learn work cell design, all that stuff. And you were just about to say something about the 21st century machinist that we wanted to catch on audio. So please take it away, Greg.
So when you look at the potential market for collaborative automation, kind of conservative estimates say that there are somewhere between 10 and 20 million tasks that could be automatable, given the technology that we have right now. And if you look at all the cobots that have been shipped by all the manufacturers worldwide, it's like 100,000 cobots. So there's this huge gap between the realized market and the potential market. And there's a huge amount of investment that's going into how do you actually expand that served market? How do you solve those problems? How do you get to those customers? And most of that investment is really going towards applying techniques like AI, machine learning, responsive web technologies to try to provide knowledge to people that don't have experience to do these kinds of implementations. The one thing that we've seen from our distributors and from integrators and from our customers is that everybody's worst experience ever is the first time they try to do one of these projects, that they just don't know what they don't know.
Yep.
And once they've gone through that journey from like, I need to automate this work cell, to having the work cell actually running with reasonable uptime and not needing a whole bunch of assists, that's a pain. The second time they do it, they know what to do much better. And the next time after that, it's even better. So there's a learning aspect to it, and it is multidisciplinary, and it is a lot of it has to do with the specifics of the situation. You know, when you look at all the different permutations of all the different machines, all the different work pieces, all of the different end effectors, all of the different other technologies you may need to apply, it's this huge universe. So the idea of being able to sort of pre-compute all of those solutions seems like a really big job. But a lot of these things, they aren't rocket science. You don't need to be up on your reverse Jacobians to be able to do this. You just need to know that if you have a ferrous workpiece, that you may want to consider a magnetic end effector, or if you have something that is extremely porous, then a vacuum approach may not be appropriate, or that there are sort of lessons that you need to learn. If you think about what people go through to become a qualified machinist, someone who's capable of using CNC machines to do stuff, there's training involved in that. There's apprenticeship, there's hands-on learning that's required to do it. With the invention of collaborative automation and collaborative work cell robots, we've taken one part of that implementation and made it much easier, the programming. And that's a very important breakthrough. But there's all these other things, all these other discrete tasks. And if you, and I really think that there's a manufacturing job that's needed in the future. And I called it the 21st century machinist, but just someone who understands how to implement a work cell, how to go through that design process. And it is a design process. It's like, hey, I've got this interesting problem. I need to be able to pick up parts in a random orientation and always make sure that it gets into the machine this way. Oh, okay, that's the perfect thing for a regrip fixture. Like there's
most people have never even heard of that unless they've been in automation before.
And I've now heard of it for 3 months, so I'm an expert, right? But it's definitely there's a broad range of disciplines and knowledge that's required to be able to do this effectively. And people don't get that knowledge just by going to a robot programming course. It's a broader range of stuff. And I'd love to see that kind of trade evolve. That this is something that people could go into for their business, and they could either be a part of a company doing this over and over again, or it could even be sort of a freelance thing where they offer their services to companies that need it.
Yeah. When I look at my time at UR, we've done, myself or my team has been a part of a few thousand sales. And I would say that there's likely no two applications that are identical when you look at the exact setup, the exact programming. It's very rare. It happens, but it's not that common. But what happens is there's a lot of similarities, right? So there's, when you take it one step above that and you categorize them into whether it's specific machine type or group of application, you start to see these similarities. And then it's like, how do you bridge the gap from there to yes, no two are exactly the same, but they're very similar. And how can you then deliver that knowledge to the end customer that's doing this for the first or even the second or the third time, that it's relatively rudimentary versus having to recreate the wheel each time.
So I think there's this like training for a trade, that's part of it. The other thing that I think is a direction to go that has nothing to do with product development is just trying to build a way so that people who are trying to solve these problems can interact with each other. And so I'm old school, going back to list serve days, but the idea of internet-based communities to allow people to share knowledge is something that I think is a potential solution for what you're talking about. That since every solution is a little bit unique, that people who are going through and doing their first time implementing something on a particular machine type or unique end effector that they haven't used before, being able to reach out to say, hey, what are the best practices to try and use this thing, and be able to interact with a broad community of people that are willing to share. Right now, one of the things that I don't like about like the FANUC integrator model is that every integrator considers that knowledge to be part of their value add. And so they're very reluctant to share it broadly. But if we're talking about a 21st century machinist, he's going to be proud of the stuff that he's done. And he's going to be willing to participate in a community where he can get answers and he can give answers. And if that makes him, become more respected in that community as someone who adds value, that's something that people would probably get a lot of satisfaction out of. So I think this idea of fostering a community of implementers, like you are makers, is something that could be hugely beneficial, because at the end of the day, these are not projects that are particularly hard, but the challenges that you get in each one of them might be unique enough that you want to reach out and get some advice.
There's a great community online called the Instant Machinists, and it reminds me so much of the CNC community. I think in the 20th century, CNC community was probably very closed, and it was all about speeds and feeds. And really, as this community started to open up, it was more than that. It wasn't just speeds and feeds. It started to take on material science. Like these guys in their garage with the CNC machine started to learn the real tricks that you could use to create a very tightly toleranced, 5-axis degree of freedom, machined part on a CNC. And that started to become approachable for every single person. It took a long time, but it really grew organically, I think, out of a lot of communities online. So it's interesting. I think the 21st century machinists, in the same way, they're going to require, if there's robotics involved, they're going to require material science knowledge on, as you said, like magnetic grippers, right? Versus porous vacuum grippers for different types of tasks and things like that. And Zach and I have definitely walked the floors. And I would say that the most common thing that people are looking for, because a lot of times they've read the books and they've Googled it and they've done the research on what it would take, because they've been thinking about automation for a decade at times, and they're looking for someone to just look at them and be like, no, here's the trick.
Sure.
Right. And that trick could very be what you said, like a regrowth fixture. Oh, we never thought of that before. Maybe that's what we needed,
And often it's like super specific to their industry or their machine that they're using. And so it's almost like if you try to make it too broad, then it's not specific enough when you come up with a solution. So you almost have to make it like a peer-to-peer sharing mechanism that broadly covers it, and a guy across the world has had the same machine, similar industry, and he's willing to share, because it's not proprietary to what they do on a daily basis, but he's giving to the community that he also is getting from to help him spin up his automation experience. And I've seen this go on, and I often draw it as I've worked with, I think, 40 different distributors now that you are, and you watch them, and it's so hard to do because you watch them go through this process, and I want to help.
Every
You
time.
watch like the new ones go through this like learning process. Like, how do I ramp their learning so that when they go through their first deployment as a distributor and they're like, oh wow, like there was a lot to that.
Yeah, we bit off way more than we thought we should.
A lot. And then they learn more, and then they have this application or a couple of application engineers that become so skilled after 4 or 5 years, and they're all constantly still learning new things. There's never not more to learn, but they all be based on the industries that they have locally or the types of applications that they've somehow found themselves on from the opportunities that they've gotten. All have led themselves to have slightly different skill sets and history, but they would be so much more powerful if they could share it together. But obviously we have competitive, challenges. And so there's this like information that's just, I want to be able to ooze, and we try to serve as a medium to help do that. But it's just not the same as the guy that has actually deployed it himself for, 100, 200, 300 robots.
And I would say the individuals are typically very open to sharing,
Yes.
the individual
Yes.
people themselves. It's when you get the groups together, it's when they're, kind of like in a company setting or something like that, and there's the risk of it being considered intellectual property. That's when the hesitation comes out, against sharing that openly. But people in general, just like they would for an instant machinist or something like that, are really open to sharing. So I think fostering that individual transaction is really, important in that regard.
But I think it's also important to recognize which parts of the market, like we don't need to come up with a community that's perfect for every single customer in the world. And there may be, if someone is using their UR robot to automate the production of hyper secret spy devices, they're probably not going to be a big participant in this. And just like somebody who is working in a large organization would probably have more hurdles to connect their cobot to a network.
Sure.
But being able to provide a forum in a community that customers that are interested in could join, then you could start to see if that would gather momentum and if there's enough value coming through it that people want to join in.
And they may not contribute, but they may ultimately use it, right? So it's like, I think of it, I liken it to Twitter. I read a lot more on Twitter than I post. If I post, it's usually angrily about the Celtics and, how terrible Jason Tatum was. But, or maybe something about the stock market, but I'm very rarely tweeting versus how many tweets I read is, 1 to 100,000 probably. And so it would be, I can imagine a community where as long as you have enough content being delivered, and those people can come from UR or from other high content contributors in the community, such as, Robotique as well is a great example. And then you have other end customers that do contribute, but I bet you would get a lot of like much more consumers than you do contributors. But that, I don't think it's a bad thing as long as there's enough, variance of people that are still contributing from others outside of the companies that are obviously stand to gain something from a monetary standpoint.
So the question is then, why do people contribute? What do they actually do it for? There could be a few reasons. And this is a question I'd love you guys to answer too, but they're either doing it for themselves, just for kicks, or they're doing it to build their own personal brand, so to speak,
Sure.
And actually kind of increase awareness of who they are and what their skill sets are. It becomes almost like a resume in some ways.
Well, I think you can look at a bunch of online communities for like successful online communities to understand that kind of motivation. And as we think about this for ourselves, there's a bunch of sort of principles that you want to take into account. So successful online communities, you could look at things like TripAdvisor or Yelp or Airbnb, that there's a curation process. There's a balance between providers and consumers, and there's a feedback mechanism so that people can rate the value of the contributions. One interesting example of this is in instrumentation and test. So National Instruments has a fantastic user forum environment, and they essentially allow people to earn badges through their level of participation. And so when when you get an answer from somebody who's the grand high poobah of online contributions, you can pretty much count on that as being factual and useful. And people want to try to achieve that kind of geek cred.
Sure.
I think that's yeah, right. And like a master maker, whatever. I think that there's those kind of rewards that they definitely burnish their personal brand. They burnish what they're worth in the market if they're a provider. So like imagine you're a freelance integrator, and one of the things that you can say is that you're the brand, you are a master UR maker, and that you've answered all of these different customer questions, and you've shown that you've been able to tap into that network. That gives you something that you can talk to clients about. You can also use this as a way to provide bona fides for future business that you want to do. So there's a bunch of things that can provide value back to people who contribute. But there's a big role for people just like all they contribute are questions.
Sure. Yeah. I think that, I have long dreamed of something like this. So it's exciting to hear that you find value in that. And you seem pretty, to be fair, and I haven't met you long. I've watched you speak a few times, but you seem to be pretty up on the times in terms of what is going to be next. And I'm sure that that's part of your job. So can you talk a little bit about what shapes your mindsets as you are more forward thinking than others that I've met within the industry?
It's really this gap, the gap between 100,000 shipped robots and 10 million possible robots. When I think about that, the only businesses that I've seen to achieve the kind of growth rates that we're talking about, to sort of achieve that potential, are businesses that have tapped into two things. One is platform effects, being able to balance producers and consumers, and the others that have moved on beyond sort of traditional push marketing, where pay for play marketing, where the number of leads that you get linear is to the amount of crappy content that you push out through a pipe. That the companies that actually achieve geometric growth are companies that have a compelling enough message that people share it. And so
viral growth.
Yeah. So I really think that I don't know about you, but I'm subjected to hundreds of marketing messages a day that I've developed the neural network to ignore just about all of. Yep. And so if I'm trying to figure out how to, if I was a machine shop owner and I was trying to figure out how to automate something, I would pay a hell of a lot more attention to Joe, who owns the machine shop across the street, than I would to an email from Universal Robots. So when I'm thinking about how do we get to these other 9,900,000 opportunities, I think we have to look beyond industrial automation for the models that we go after to try to help these people make their businesses better. I don't think we can just go out and say, hey, want to buy a cobot. I think we have to find people who have problems that they have no idea automation could fix, and help them understand how they could do that easily, whether it's just by learning something themselves or by tapping into a network of people who could help them get something done. But I think that that's the, when I look at those problems, I don't see an analogy in how Fanuc serves the automotive industry. I see an analogy in terms of how Uber or Airbnb grew.
Sure.
So that's why I'm more focused towards this sort of community and platform orientation.
Highly consumer focused. And can I say the Platform Revolution is a great book, and I encourage anyone to read it for sure, because it is talking about a lot of the same ideas that you're talking about: viral growth, fostering a community of producers and consumers that create value, because everybody gets stuck on their roadmap and pushing products out linearly,
Well,
and
I get all
that's
my
not
books
how
from
you can scale.
so-
What?
I said I get all my books from you, so you got to read this
Yeah.
book. So
Oh, platform revolution is a heavy lift, man. That is, that is it. You're like tossing that off as a light recommendation. Somebody gets into that, they're going to be occupied for a little while trying to
Yeah.
read their way through
Yeah.
it. So
Did you listen to it on audiobook or did you read it?
I listened to it on audiobook, and it took like 3 trips to Cape Cod to plow my way through it. It was
Yeah.
same. I had
It's
to repeat a
the
lot
actual
of the
book has a
different-
lot of graphics on it, which are kind of interesting, and I think that helps out. Actually, the Lean Robotics book by Sam Bouchard is the same way. Listen to it on audiobook. I think it's great. But when you can see it in the actual graphics on the page, really help, I think, a lot of them.
Yeah, I kindled my way through the Lean Robotics book, but I did Platform Revolution on audio.
Yeah.
The other book that I had that really influenced me a lot over the past few weeks is Marketing 4.0 and Unmarketing.
unmarketing.
Yeah, so unmarketing is a hoot. It's the opposite of Platform Revolution. It's a little cream puff of a book. You can, and it's hugely entertaining. The guy who wrote it, he also has a relative small time internet famous YouTube video called QR Codes Kill Kittens. And he like delights in pointing out the absurdities of some marketing stuff, like the QR codes thing. He talks about like driving down the road and pulling up behind a bus, and there's a gigantic QR code on the back of the bus. And he's like, so I'm supposed to take out my phone while I'm driving and take a picture of the QR code on the back of the bus to, so he's just very pragmatic in terms of
People aren't gonna do that.
Yeah.
And I've never used that. I actually never used the QR code until COVID, until you went to the restaurant now with the menu on the thing with the QR. I didn't even know that they had integrated it into your camera on your phone, and you don't even need the QR app anymore. That's how slow, I'm proof that I don't use it. But it's really interesting that you bring this up, because we have a good friend also went to WPI as well. So we do need to get into the whole WPI experience, since all 3 of us are alums. But we have a friend who started his own marketing company. His name's Chris Walker. Refined Labs out of Boston is their name. And he posts primarily on LinkedIn, and he's part of the reason of the inspiration that Chris and I had to start the podcast. His videos are really good. But the one thing he talks about is, he said he's had 100 views on his website, 1,000 views on YouTube, and like 100,000 on LinkedIn. And he's like, stop trying to post things to your website and expect traffic to come to your website. People aren't consuming them. They're not going to your website to consume your content. They're going to your website to buy or maybe figure out something after, but they've already decided by the time they probably get to your website. Likely, not always, but there's a higher chance. But where they're going to consume, they want to consume where they want to consume. They don't want to read things on some off website. They want to read it on their sites that they frequent daily. If that's LinkedIn, that's their professional area. If it's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, they go to these sites daily to consume content. And when they want to consume, they will consume. So put your content where they like to consume. Don't put it in their email where they don't want to consume those emails being directly forwarded to them. Some people do, but I can tell you made a point saying that you have these neural networks that block all marketing. You should see how many unread emails I have. I haven't even done the block, or the filter.
I unsubscribe like crazy.
You unsubscribe like crazy. I just block them out. They don't even show to me anymore. Mentally, when I look down and I don't even need I can just tell that it's a marketing email and I'm not looking at it. So it's really interesting. I'm curious of your thoughts on where to put content.
So I think more important than where to put content is content that doesn't suck.
Fair.
True.
Okay. And that if you have compelling content that is compelling enough that someone wants to share it, then you stand a chance. I believe that the friction associated with sharing is so much lower through social media than any other channel. So that would be my, like, if you have something worthwhile talking about it on social media, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram, any of those I think is fine. But the thing that I am
authentic, is that like, you talk about unmarketing? I haven't read the book, but it seems a little bit like you're saying go against that marketing pitch. Like, stop trying to sell everyone all the time. Make it authentic, make it real. Talk, like,
give value.
Don't even post it yourself. Have your customers post it, right? That
well, that would be great. But I think the idea that you are that the content that you're posting is intended to add value for the person who's reading it. Yep. That there's a, if you're going to post something about reach, speed, and payload, to make sure that the thing that you're posting is primarily around helping people understand how those specs work versus why you're the best. That sort of trusting that people can make the best decision for themselves if you do the right things to help them understand the true situation. So I think it has a lot more to do with trying to put yourself in service to your audience. Like, how can you help them with the content that you're distributing versus what kind of response can you get? What can you click? And I had an interesting conversation with the folks that did some branding work for UR. And one of the things that they were talking about is like trying to create cognitive dissonance in an audience, because it's like a hook, like you see something and it confuses you enough that you linger on it. And I had a really negative reaction to that, even though I've read the research that I know that it works. It seems like a crappy thing to do to a customer. That if you can't hold someone's attention authentically, then you need to find a new way to try to engage with them, not try and trick their lizard brain into spending 6 seconds looking at your thing versus 3. So I think if you don't have something important to say, then don't say it. But it's our job inside of UR to really find the people who have a painful enough problem that automation can fix, that they want to engage with us. And when we haven't found the magic formula to do that. No one has. And you look at our competitors, they are as bad or worse in terms of
the whole industry.
Everyone's marketing is
there. The whole industry is really, and you compare it to maybe like software. I have a lot of friends in software in the Boston area, and I would say that the marketing style is quite different, right? And I think that it's partially, the industry adopting at a little bit of a different pace. But
it's also just the fact that
people
like we've invented like the hammer. It has a broad range of applications. There are a lot of problems that this thing solves.
Sure.
And the best way to engage with a customer is around the problem that they're trying to solve, not the,
Cool.
not the thing that solves the problem. And so we have this multiplication thing that we're trying to deal with, that, we can go out to the world and we can say, hey, we got a cobot, want to buy it. But if we want to talk about customer problems, then we need to talk specifically to, hey, you got boxes coming to the end of an assembly line and you need to get them on a pallet. Hey, you've got CNC machines, you need to load parts into them. There's a necessity to become much more specific about the problems that we're solving. And doing that when we just provide a component of the solution is kind of a leap that none of the cobot companies I've seen really make progress there.
Yeah, I have, my mind is spinning on how to create a marketing video for it right now. I think I have a good idea. I'm gonna hold on to that and call Joe Campbell and Rob Bugard tomorrow. So
we'll look forward to that.
Yeah. I'm sure they're gonna.
I got a question for you, Greg. So, we kind of want to hear about your past experience too. Coming from the rest of Teradyne and your history coming up through your career. But on the subject that we're currently on with this marketing topic, is there any other analogy that you've previously had to deal with in your career where it's a similar type of market potential growth and challenge to really get valuable content out to people? Have you done this before? Or, what do you think? What's your experience there?
No, I'm totally flying blind. No, because the rest of my experience, I did 10 years of test equipment development for a military company, Raytheon, and then the next 25 years was in semiconductor ATE, and that is the ultimate in account-based marketing. So you have a finite number of consumers of your equipment. You have a constantly evolving set of requirements, but a well-constrained market. And so
it's like the opposite of you are.
That world is all about like solution value propositions. So how can your solution provide better value than someone else's? With UR, because of the breadth of applicability and the number of customers and the indirect channel, I really needed to go back to school. So that's why I've been doing a hell of a lot of reading to try and understand this from an academic perspective. But the basic principle, of marketing is that you have to identify people that have a problem that your product can fix.
Yeah.
And that problem has you need different techniques to try and get after that, depending on whether you're talking about 40 customers worldwide or 100,000 potential customers worldwide. And that's where these notions of platform and viral messaging become, and social platforms become a lot more important. But I'm a noob,
Based
so
on
yeah. You're gonna say, Chris?
Yeah. So one of the other things about the platform revolution was critical mass, right? Mm-hmm. Where you really, for example, with Uber had to pay drivers and they had to pay riders to actually start using their platform before they had enough people to get a critical mass to actually let that scaling or viral factor, start to grow.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yep.
So do you think we've hit that critical mass yet at Universal Robots, and do you think we're at the point where we can leverage what we already have and what we've already done? Do you think there's still more work to be done in that regard?
I think there's more work. I think that the advantage is that we have 50,000 implementations, right? That's cool. And that is a very significant number with respect to the size of the industrial automation industry. But in terms of the potential market, and especially the customers that are too small to be efficiently served by the current distribution and implementation methods, I don't think we're at critical mass yet. And I think that there is that we have to take a very methodical approach to try to, I'm thinking of it mostly as a community issue. How do you build providers and customers in a balanced way so that they reinforce? And we may have to figure out ways to incentivize participation from customers or providers in that process.
Yeah. Interesting.
But we're not going to pay anyone to buy a robot. So
yeah, no, I wasn't hinting at that. Yeah. So, when you were offered this position to come over to the, to lead the president of the industrial automation segment, what was the motivating factor behind that? Was there anything with prior experience? As you said, you were coming in blind, right? But, why did you say yes? Why did you want to take on this new challenge?
So the job I left was, I was running a business that was like $2 billion a year, and we had the opportunity to probably grow it to, like 2.5, maybe $3 billion over the next 4 years. It was very stable, we had an excellent product. We had stellar customer service reputation. And I was delighted. It was like I was in my dream job. And so when I started talking to Mark Jagila, our CEO, about a role in industrial automation, I had really mixed feelings about it, because it's very different. What we're trying to do is we're trying to scale the industrial automation group from, like our immediate goal is to go from 300 million to $1 billion over the next few years. That requires building a lot of infrastructure, helping scale, helping to try and figure out the way that we generate sufficient new business and reduce the friction of implementation so we get more repeat business from customers that we've served. It's a whole new set of interesting problems. The other thing that I've really come to appreciate is, in my old job, we were in a very good position in the market. Things were going very, very, very well. And I would find myself on Sunday night, like dreading the week, because there was nowhere to go but down. Like it was all about perfect execution and keeping everything going exactly right.
Sure.
In industrial automation, the upside is amazing. And there are a lot of things to work on to try and make things better. And the notion that ideas that we have right now could have not only a material impact on what our outcome is, but what we do could actually change the scale of the entire industry. If we come up with great ideas, the collaborative automation business could end up twice as big if we don't. So that's the kind of opportunity that I think only comes along once in a lifetime. And I really couldn't walk away from that kind of an opportunity.
Sounds exciting when you put it like that. Yeah.
Yeah. The opportunity, the challenge as well. So I have a good question for him.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Here, a more lighthearted question. So you have to answer. There's a gun to your head. Which is your favorite robot company under the Teradyne umbrella? And you have to answer.
Well, since I'm talking to two UR guys, I have to say UR.
Oh, that's the easy way out, though.
I know. I'm no fool. No. So I think it's
like picking one of your favorite children. We all know that it happens. I have one child, so it's easy for me.
Here's the deal. So since Jürgen left and I've been in the interim role, acting on his behalf, waiting for a new president to show up on the scene, I've had the opportunity to dive much, much more deeply into UR than I have for any of the other companies.
Sure.
And so I know a much broader range of people inside the organization, and I have a much better feel for the technology than I do for the other companies.
Sure.
I think that you are from a return, like generating a return for the overall corporation, you are is at a much more mature state and generating a lot more profit. It's also blazed the trail that the other companies are going to be going along.
Sure.
You know, so in terms of operations excellence, in terms of maturity of engineering process,
Great salespeople, certainly much better over here.
Oh yeah, definitely much better and more confident too.
I don't know about that.
No, so I do think that you are. I guess you always favor your oldest, and UR's been a part of the company for a lot longer. And I also I see this opportunity with UR that, if you look at Mir and you look at AutoGuide, they're still at that, hey, we're growing 50% per year, blah, 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 blah. With UR, because of the industrial downturn in 2019 and then COVID in 2020, I feel like UR is an organization that feels like it has something to prove, that there is this incredible growth potential and this trajectory that we can get back on. And I want to be a part of that. I want to be part of the team that gets us back to 40, 50% growth per year, because I think we can do it. And when you do that on top of a 200 and something $million base, that you're talking about something that moves the needle at the enterprise level for all of Teradyne.
Definitely.
Very cool.
So I want to talk about WPI because we are all alums there. So what year did you graduate?
Well, there you go. I never did. I had a baby instead. So
really?
Yeah. So I did my undergrad at Penn, and then I got 5 courses into my master's at WPI. When my wife and I had our first baby, and at that point in time, I had to make a decision in terms of how much time I put into school, how much time I put into work, and how much time I put into home. And so I decided to put it on hold. But
wow.
So 2 of the 3 of us are successful WPI students.
Well, we're undergraduates, so we're
we're about the same level, I would say. So that caused you to move up to Massachusetts, and you were working in Raytheon after that, or during that time in Massachusetts?
Yeah, so I grew up in Massachusetts. I went to school in Penn, came back, worked for Raytheon, and the first few years that I was at Raytheon, they had WPI did a lot of graduate education out in the area where Raytheon was. So it was kind of the preferred MSEE track for people that were at Raytheon. Really great tuition reimbursement and everything else. So, I went through all the, let's see, computer architecture, state space analysis, PLL, phase lock loop, all that kind of coursework. And then I had Sarah. So,
And, you were working in engineering at Raytheon. How long did it take you to kind of move your way up into management and start to get to that higher level? Did that happen at Raytheon?
Yeah, so I was at Raytheon for 10 years. I guess it was about 3 years out of school when I became a group leader. And so I ended up, when I left Raytheon, I had a section of about 40 people. And I discovered, I was like a 31-year-old guy wearing a cardigan and, like talking about budgets. And I was bored. It was like, I felt like I was prematurely 50.
Meanwhile, I'm wearing a cardigan right
Yeah.
now, but
And no, and it was literally, I like had it on a coat rack in my office, and it was like Mr. Rogers. I'd come into work and I'd put on my work sweater and I'd sit at my desk and I'd do my sort of section manager
I
thing.
store my coats right back there. I
Yeah.
just pull one out whenever I have a meeting and take it off after I don't for the virtual COVID meetings.
And so I was like, okay, I'm too young for this fate. So I went and I got a job as a principal engineer at LTX, and a semiconductor ATE company, and went from having a big group to being an individual contributor. And they shuffled me back into management over about a 3-year period. And so back up, and I ended up running engineering and applications at LTX. And then that's when I hopped over into more of a marketing and business kind of a role. And then I joined Teradyne as an individual contributor in product management, and repeated the process. It's
cycle,
like,
the beatdown.
no matter how hard I try, I end up back in management.
Yeah. I had a question for you. When you decided to take the role to come on as the president of the industrial automation segment, you come into this role pretty cold with a new set of management that you have to guide. So, what kind of strategies did you employ as a manager to be able to, kind of work with a new team or a set of new teams that are very disparate, and really to get them start to communicate? Is there any kind of strategies that you employ in that regard?
I guess the primary one is to try to listen first and act next. That if you look at it, there are four organizations that were executing well. If you include Energid, that, and they all had a plan the day before I arrived. So all I had to do was like not screw it up. So trying to dive in and understand things first, and then start to engage in areas where I felt like people needed help. And then the other was in areas where we had sort of a strategic need to do more. So there are things that UR and Mir and AutoGuide are trying to do that we can enable more easily by leveraging stuff from the rest of Teradyne. There are also opportunities in automation that exist between where these companies are, to try to, and so I see my main value add is in those two areas that,
those intersections.
How do I make progress on that stuff without screwing up what each of these companies is trying to do on their own? But I think that trying to find product line synergies, market synergies, and scaling factors is the stuff that I'm focused on. With Jürgen leaving and diving more into the day-to-day operations of UR, I've definitely gotten more involved in terms of just trying to optimize the plan that UR has, and try to make sure that that the company is ready for the growth that's coming at it, is sort of the major thing that I've been engaged in over the last 2 months. I think our market is about to go on a tear. And so from an operational perspective and a sales perspective and a service perspective, are we ready for what's going to hit us? Has been the thing that I've spending most of my time on.
It's already starting. It's been wild. COVID was this like slam on the brakes, and then turn around and drive as fast as you can. It feels like it's just from a sales manager and somebody that keeps pulse on what's going on locally. And I haven't been around long enough to say that I've been through this multiple times, but this is certainly the wildest thing that I've seen. Not from, obviously COVID's crazy, but the basically everything stopped to go on the gas, but not go back to where we were before, but to be even more bullish. And I think you see a little bit with like how the stock market has reacted, but even within manufacturing and with our customers and the types of applications, I think the way that COVID has changed people's mindsets. I look at companies in Maine, and my little brother is a salesperson for Access New England in Maine and New Hampshire and Vermont, and customers that 5 or 6 years ago, when I was pedaling around a demo robot, did not want anything to do with robots, are interested in seeing it and want and know what it means, and they know they need to do it. And there isn't this push against, I don't want to automate, I'll never automate, to I know I have to. And the mindset change in the market feels completely different from 1 year ago. Yeah. I've never seen that much of just a shift. It's like a seismic shift had gone on that I think, from my perspective, could have taken another 5 years if it weren't for COVID, and how the mindset has changed of these. Really, it's really the small and medium-sized enterprises that I've seen that shift in. So,
but I think it's true in large enterprise too, that every companies of every size are now confronted by their customers asking them about like assurance of supply. Yep. How can I know that you're going to come through for me? And if you're a small machine shop and you're counting on your entire workforce to be healthy all the time, you've got a risk. And if you're trying to compete with somebody who's shopping, sending jobs out to be done offshore or in Mexico, you need something that's going to give you an ability to compete. And I think that collaborative automation is kind of the equalizer, that it's something that lets small and medium-sized companies punch above their weight.
Yep.
And I think that those guys, this is a near-death experience for them. They're looking for ways that they can make sure that they're going to get through whatever comes and compete.
Yeah, it's like we've been able to, before 2020, it was like we've been able to do this and grow great from 2010 to 2020. In a lot of ways, automation we're fine. We don't necessarily need it. And I think some of those customers now are like, okay, we see the risks and we want to try and, de-risk the future so that we can grow even faster, because we've seen some companies go berserk that we would never be able to attain. 30-40% growth for some of these companies would be catastrophic. And so how can they potentially satisfy that? And I think automation prevents or provides a capability to do such. So it's interesting. I've got an interesting question for you. So I was speaking with Ryan Weaver the other day of Access New England, and he had an interesting comment, and I figured I would record this as I asked you, just so we could get a real reaction. But this definitely could be one that you asked me to crop out, so we'll see. We've seen a lot of great integrators come, and the ones that are like super focused on UR as their core competencies tend to be greater than the ones that have it as one of the things that they do. I enlist, Fancore and Onexia and Cross Company, Fusion OEM. There's a couple of ones that are kind of across the US, Pro Cobots, there's a bunch. But as we look forward into how we can really grow our ecosystem, I look backwards at some strategies that have been deployed in the past. Say when Parker built their distribution network in the 1990s, maybe it was 1980s, 1990s, they really allowed people to just create their own distributorship. They sort of sponsored them along the way. I don't know the exact details. I'm sure someone can correct me on exactly how it went down. But the question comes up of, would we ever, sponsor an integrator, or maybe an integrator competition where it's like put together a business plan? I don't know. Teradyne is going to sponsor $1 million, and you can go for a fund. You give us your 5-year plan, we'll fund you $200K for 5 different integrators based on that plan.
Yeah.
So that people can go and create these, startup companies that build themselves around, and maybe it's targeting a specific application or something, but somebody that's very focused on the product. And it was an interesting idea, so I figured I would throw it your way and see what you thought.
I think it is a cool idea. And I have no
idea.
idea.
Like Shark Tank.
Say what?
And we could record it like Shark Tank.
Yeah, well, we could. The thing is that there's the one thing that I'm sure is if you fast forward 5 years from now and you look back, our distribution is going to look different. Whether whether we just let that happen to us or we drive the bus, it's going to be different because there's a tremendous amount of consolidation that's happening between distributors. That's creating conflicts and holes in coverage that have to get worked out. A number of our distribution partners are interested in things like digital direct fulfillment.
Sure.
And so we're going to have to work out that issue. I think that there is room for this idea of dedicated integrators, like a single product line integrator that is either geographically focused or solution focused.
Yep.
I also think that there are potential business models around this, call it like freelance integrators.
Yep.
If you think about like an average cobot implementation is probably, part-time, some work over a month, and then maybe a week of on-site work to get the implementation going for a lot of these. That's something that is perfectly doable in some sort of a digitally mediated market, so that
like a gig economy kind of thing.
Yeah, you could totally do that as a gig economy. So I don't know which of these ideas is going to have and is going to end up winning, but
Sure.
I do think that we have to be open to partners approaching us with different ideas like this, and I think we have to do some experimentation on our own. So Zach, if you want to put together a business plan, we'll look at making an investment.
Sounds
Just
good.
sign yourself up.
I just thought it was interesting of a way to get new blood in there that might not have capital at some point.
Yeah.
Might be really smart, might be coming out of college. I think I'm close to the Boston community. There's a lot of really smart individuals in that area that could see this as a huge future. And so I was thinking, is there a way to potentially catapult those guys instead of going and working somewhere else, going down this type of a path of very focused on UR and potentially solving some of the future problems that we know we're going to run into, but that they don't have the capital to do so now.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. The one thing that I don't want to do is I like the idea of investing in people with good ideas. The thing that I don't want to do is give the impression to our existing partner network that we've got our thumb on the scale, that that we're going to give those people an unfair advantage versus the services that they offer, because they've invested in us and we've reaped success from what they've done. Mm-hmm. So I want to be careful that in all of these ideas, that as we figure out what to do, that we incorporate the best of our distribution network to get their feedback and figure out how we can move forward in a way that enables them to be successful in their business and enables us to achieve the growth targets that we want.